All right, so the question now is, will it ultimately be content creators who end up saving professional golf? And what I mean by that is, for as divided as everyone has been over the PGA Tour and LIV, one thing that everyone can now agree on is that the content that these creators have been making has been wildly successful. The recent Duels from LIV Golf is now the most watched LIV Golf YouTube video ever, and we also saw incredible viewership out of the Creator Classic from the PGA Tour. But the question really remains, does this ultimately then move the needle or not when it comes to the ultimate marketing efforts of getting more people to watch these individual leagues, whether that's watching more of the PGA Tour events or the LIV Golf events? We're going to talk about what the effect is of each one, what the future ultimately is going to be for these, and just see if they can translate some of that success into actual viewership or not. There's a lot to look at and a lot to dig in here. And of course, everyone's been hanging on, waiting for those ratings from LIV Miami. I've never seen so many people waiting so impatiently for something. And there's good reason. We're waiting to see if this has any real effect over it. So there's a lot to dig into. First, of course, we've got to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. And guys, it's Masters Week, and there's a reason why Titleist has been the #1 ball at the Masters year after year. So ask yourself, how did you play your last time out? Whether you shot an all-time low or it was just a tough day on the course, you always want to do better the next time you tee it up. And outperforming yesterday starts with trusting your golf ball. So the Titleist Pro V1, Pro V1X, and Pro V1X Left Dash are the most technologically advanced in the game and the ultimate golf ball performance choice. They all offer exceptionally long distance, consistent flight, and unrivaled control. Personally, I love the softer feel of the Pro V1. Mike's been playing the Pro V1X for quite a while because he loves the higher trajectory that he gets out of it. And what that really boils down to is getting fit for yourself. So go to Titleist.com, find a fitter near you, go and try the new Titleist Pro V1, Pro V1X, and Pro V1X Left Dash, and see for yourself which is the best fit for your game. They are really remarkable, and the new ball has been performing so well for me. Like I said, no wonder it's the #1 choice at the Masters. So, all right, Mike, diving into this. You know, you watched it. What did you think? First thing, the most recent of these events that we're going to talk about was, of course, the Duels, which was on Grant Horvat's YouTube channel. What was your initial thoughts there?
I thought it was, I'm going to say an initial, I think, a success, because not only the 1 million+ views that it got in a 24-hour period, but just from personally watching it, I was entertained. I had a lot of laugh out loud moments. For me, it was nice to see the personalities of Cam Smith and DJ. Yep. You don't get that when you watch LIV. They're serious, they're competing. So we know the personalities of the creators. You watch it on a week in, week out basis, but we don't get to see that side. So to have Phil and Grant, I know they do their YouTube thing, so that's a little different, but to have those other guys out there, I thought it was great. I do think that it can improve. Obviously, you try something for the first time, there's always room for improvement. I know we're going to talk about that, but overall, I thought it was pretty darn good.
Yeah, and I would say, just taking a glance at one thing I can say is that the engagement was tremendous, because you look at the number of comments that were on that video. But just taking a glance at those as holistic view, I would say that overall, 80% or so, rough number, it was positive of the feedback. But
Some
you're right,
wanted more golf.
There was feedback. There's growing pains. There's certain things that I had a little bit of trouble with watching it as well. I think there's certain things that they could have taken from the PGA Tour Creator Classic that they could have learned from and made it a little bit better, and vice versa. I think there's certain things at the Creator Classic. So we'll get into it. But first, let's talk about this tale of the tape. So in the first one day that this was on YouTube, and this was on Grant Horvat's YouTube channel, the Duels picked up 1.5 million views, which immediately rockets it to the most viewed LIV Golf video ever on YouTube.
Right.
Because now that you don't really see them streaming live on YouTube anymore, but going back to when they were streaming, they weren't pulling those types of views. Now some of LIV's most viewed videos are the highlight videos, which I've seen pull maybe 300,000 views on the high end. Nowhere near the type of viewership that this got. And then on the PGA Tour side, the most recent, the Creator Classic, TPC Sawgrass, streamed live and picked up now about 1 million. It's actually over 1 million views at this point. So you're talking about each one garnering over 1 million views. That's rivaling what we see in television broadcasts for, regular week in and week out events. So there's no doubt there it's a resounding success. I think one thing that has definitely been brought up, and I'll admit to you that I do not have any additional information on this, and you guys can weigh in the comments if you've got some additional insight. I know there's been a lot of speculation, but one thing that was definitely very visibly missing from the duels was Bryson DeChambeau. And on top of that, I still think it was a wise choice to put this on Grant Horvat's channel, because Grant is in a lot of ways the top dog when it comes to YouTube right now. So if you're going to go hard after a YouTube audience, putting this on his channel makes a whole lot of sense.
Sure.
I would say the only person that I would put ahead of Grant right now in viewership and relevance when it comes to YouTube is probably Bryson himself. So it does seem a little bit odd that they wouldn't put this on Bryson's channel and have Bryson there. I think that could have even taken it to another even higher level.
Yeah.
I mean, not to take anything away from Grant. This is a huge viewership. He's wildly popular, but Bryson has been pulling more views.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you could take it a step further and say, how come they didn't invite anyone from Dude Perfect and throw it there?
Right, who like OG YouTube.
OG biggest out of anyone who would have been there. But, I still think it was a very wise move. They did that. And the viewership numbers between both, I mean, pretty impressive. It does show you that people are watching this stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I kind of going back to it, like I said, we'll talk more in a second, but whether or not it translates to people actually watching the LIV event. Now, this one did have to get pushed back a little bit. You were mentioning because of NCAA tournament that might have pushed it too far back to really translate to views, but the headlines are out there and you see it all over Twitter. Everyone's waiting to see what LIV Miami did ratings-wise because, as everyone has said, it's like the first real big test for LIV. I even saw like Rappaport talking about this. It's the first time they're not going head to head against a more of the signature or premier PGA Tour events.
Yep.
It's a domestic audience here in the States. It's on more traditional broadcasts with FS1 and even YouTube television. So once we get those, we'll definitely let you guys know. But as of recording, they're not out yet.
I almost could care less about the number of views that a broadcast gets for each tour. It's almost, I'd rather see the numbers of the age groups that each broadcast gets.
Right.
At this point.
I agree. I think that's what we're going to talk about, like where we go for the future, is that I think that this is more further evidence of LIV's more long-term view, which you talked about in the last episode. They're not looking 1, 2, 3 years. They're looking 10 years out.
Yeah.
And you have to think, like from a business standpoint, which one makes more sense to try to pull viewership away from the PGA Tour, existing kind of golf fans and viewership, or if you're looking long-term, do you create a new audience?
Yeah, right.
Do you create that as far as bringing in YouTube and a young demographic and bring them along? That's what we're going to talk about when it comes to personalities and development in a second, because I think there's some interesting things they can do there.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I do want to mention this because I got to tip my hat. I think LIV did a great job in promoting this event. It was all over my Instagram feed.
Flooded social.
For the week leading up. It's obvious because they all did it. In all their contracts that these creators signed, they all had to deliver a reel on their page inviting people to come watch LIV Miami and meet me. They're saying, come down here, meet me. We'll be here tomorrow, all of us. Brilliant. I thought that was great. I saw Grant. I saw Bustage. I saw those guys doing that. So the way that they went about it, nothing against the PGA Tour, but I didn't see the same kind of, hype for that one. It was the Players Week. Doesn't need that much hype, but for the creator side, I didn't see.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how much of the PGA Tour rely on what it knows best: traditional broadcast, traditional ticket sales, things like that. But let's just quickly compare the two before we talk about whether or not it moves the needle that much. The Creator Classic, I'm going to give you my own personal opinion. I want you guys to weigh in the comments with your opinions of what you thought of one versus the other when it comes to format if you watched both. I would say the Creator Classic, it looked to me and felt much more like a traditional broadcast. When I mean that, I mean traditional, like just like what you see on the PGA Tour on Sunday. Camera angles, tracers, trackman, commentator. And I think that was like the real key difference for me there. When you flipped it over and watched the duels, and this could have been very intentional, it felt more like a YouTube video.
Right.
Cart cams, handheld cameras out there on the tee boxes, everybody very mic'd up, more direct talking to camera. You had Grant treating it like one of his videos, which as well he should in that format, but Grant talking right to the audience in the camera. Guys, I'm excited. This is whatever.
I think that was a recipe for success.
In a lot of ways it was. where I think that they can each learn from each other. I think that LIV did a better job of showcasing the personalities by creating it more like an engaged, talking to the camera type of personality driven event.
And the format.
And the format, with the 2-man teams, but where LIV kind of slipped up in certain spots, and I saw this in the comments, so I can't be the only one thinking this, was it jumped around a bit, you know what I mean? And it was a little harder to follow the action without a traditional broadcast announcer.
Right.
We had some fun and funny color commentary coming in from guys like Bob the Sports and Mason and all these guys. But what we had on the PGA Tour side was working with like guys like Shane Bacon and doing a little bit more traditional announcing that allowed you to follow it. Like, hey, we're going to cut over to 5 here where, Trent is putting for par.
Yeah.
Right. I needed a little bit of that. We got all color commentary out of the duels without any structured announcing that would just fill me in on where we're at right now. Like I felt like we were just jumping around and it was hard to follow at times. So that was a little bit whatever, but where LIV excelled was that cart cam, that banter, that, Phil and, allowing him to be his funny self, that it felt more like a YouTube video. So 2 different flavors. If you guys liked one versus the other better, definitely let us know.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I really enjoyed the 2-man team again because, we love the scramble. I think we all kind of love scramble. We love playing in them. The fact that one guy can hit a shot in the water, the other guy picks him up. I mean, Wesley was struggling, but DJ picked him up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was very entertained by the format. It's nothing against just the individual golfer going out there, but it just wasn't as exciting. I was just watching, Gabby Golf Girl play golf. Same thing she does on her channel. Great. But it wasn't anything more exciting for me on that side.
You're talking about on the Creator Classic.
On the Creator Classic versus what I saw out of the creators over there. So.
That's where I agree. I think that the PGA Tour could take a little bit of a play the other way out of the LIV playbook here by including some more tour pros. Because I think that they are the way that you're going to guarantee good golf. All these guys who are participating are all good golfers.
Yeah.
But you kind of saw in watching the duels that difference of when the guys who are getting paid on Sunday versus the guys who are making YouTube channels are the guys who are going to make the shot under pressure one way or another.
Yeah.
So I think that it was cool to see them in a scramble format using some of the creators' shots, but also showcasing the skills of the reason why we watch professional golf. And I think that combination was important. I think LIV has a little bit, and I'm speculating here because I don't know the exact terms of their contracts, but I think LIV has a little bit of a better opportunity to do this because I think they have a little bit more power over telling their players what they should do. In other words, you can put in their contract that as being part of LIV, you have to play in some of these events. The PGA Tour does not necessarily have that. They can't require some of their players to go and play in a Creator Classic. That being said, I think there are plenty of guys on tour, especially, the younger guys who are looking to get more into the spotlight, who would be more than willing to volunteer to do these teams. So I love the idea of having a little bit of the flavor of having the creators there and that personality, but still having that really world-class golf that you would only get from having top 100 golfers playing right along with them. You were talking about major winners, Masters winners, that were in there playing.
Absolutely. For the next one, I'm going to petition to get Frank in there. You and John Rahm.
I think I would serve better in the announcer booth than I would out there with the golf club in my hands. That I can tell you that much. I can tell you that much. If me and Rom played, if we used one of my shots, I would consider it a very successful day.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean the difference would be. That's what I think the difference is. You know what I mean? Whereas with the Creator Classic, I think there was a lot of entertainment value to watching because you feel so relatable to watching Trent struggle through 17 and how many balls he puts in the water.
Relatable
but
stuff.
Does that hold you for 18 holes? I don't know. I like a little bit of really great golf too, that you see from these top tier tour pros that makes a difference. So one question that I have then is, does this move the needle? We can say without a doubt, unequivocally, this was successful in that it brought a lot of eyeballs. People watched them. They commented, they tuned in, and they engaged with it on social media, right? Yeah. To see these guys in both of these types of events. But when I ask, does it move the needle? I have to wonder if you did the one thing, let's speak about on the LIV side first. If you did the one thing that LIV has really been after, which is you got those viewership numbers up. This is, again, the most viewed LIV golf video on YouTube. Did that then, because this is a YouTube audience, people who are there to see their favorite creators in Grant and the Bryan brothers and all this stuff, were those people ultimately then more apt to then watch the LIV event? Now, we can't say for certain, because we don't have those ratings yet.
Right.
You know, and this may take long term. Like this may develop over time. But this is where I want to, like, first let's get a test of you guys in the comments. Are you any of those type of people who would be more of a chance that you watch the actual LIV broadcast because you watch the duels? You know, let me know.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think there? I just don't know yet if it ultimately moves that needle.
Well, I think it's long term, because here's what I'm thinking. There are a lot of kids that are watching Grant Horvat that might not have ever watched any professional golf, right? It's a little too old for them. They're not watching PGA Tour. They're 13.
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
You know, and now they tune into this duels. They meet for the first time, believe it or not, this is going to blow your mind, a Dustin Johnson, a Bubba Watson, legends to us,
right?
But they have no idea who they are. So now they're getting introduced to these personalities. So will it be a long-term play for this 13-year-old now in 5, 6, 7, 10 years to fall in love with LIV? The only thing they know is LIV. There's their long-term plan. And in 10 years, they're this massive, massive tour.
No doubt. And I think one thing off the bat, as much as looking long-term is always good to do when you have a business and you're trying to develop it over time. But I think one thing that they can flip the switch to make a more dramatic impact immediately would be simply having these same creators who create these, this content for them, have them physically attending the events. And I think this goes on both sides. This is something that both can learn from, both LIV and the PGA Tour, because although that's not going to translate necessarily to more of a viewership, what I could definitely see is ticket sales.
Sure.
Like, I mean, all of these guys, we've seen it even with like what Good's been doing with their events. We're seeing more live in-person events, or ticketed events that are being, pulling, huge audiences.
Sure.
If they pivoted that messaging a little bit, where you said, you watch the duels and then they say, hey, come meet the guys. They're going to be at the Saturday round of LIV this week.
Right.
There's where I could see, again, using that reference of saying like a 12-year-old age demographic of a YouTube viewer might then say to his parents, hey, I really want to meet these guys. Can you buy tickets to the LIV event and we'll go? And now they're bringing their parents along, who are maybe not necessarily in that demographic, but now they're witnessing an event.
Absolutely.
And does that then grow it in multiple ways?
It's brilliant, man.
Like,
Remember
why not?
We were leaving the PGA show in the long line waiting to just meet Grant?
Right.
Or
those Bob
kids
Does
were
Sports,
like,
same thing.
Those kids are just like, Dad, let's go over to the convention center for Grant, not for what else is going on there. So I totally agree.
And then maybe another way, and just kind of thinking this through, like a way that translate that to the broadcast would be then to have the guys there and bring them in, no different than we saw in like TGL, where they would bring like celebrities and stuff in for a couple of holes into the broadcast booth. Bring Bob Does Sports.
Yeah, bring him in there. Sure.
Joey Colcuts. Bring Grant into the booth, and then maybe some people will tune in to hear them talking as well. Because if these personalities have that big of a draw, then why not leverage them more directly in the tournament events? And the same thing, like I said, on the PGA Tour side, they could have these guys coming to events, doing meet and greets, just to bring in the audience both on site and otherwise. What this does go back to, again, is the one thing we did a whole episode on this last week, is they are starting, the more they intertwine these guys and make these guys faces, they are starting to like walk that line of what's good for one has to be good for the other. If I now have right side by side on YouTube, I've got a thumbnail that's got Fat Perez in there for the Creator Classic, and right next to it's a thumbnail for LIV and him playing in their duels. You start to say, I know these guys are not paid professionals.
Right.
They're not tour card holding guys, but I could see some some tour guys starting to speak up and being like, why is it okay for them to play in both events and not for me? We dove into it deep last week, so I don't want to get into it again, but I think it's an argument that's going to keep coming up, so definitely look out.
It's going to keep coming up, and I just want to sprinkle this into the mix because it's got me scratching my head. I want to know what you guys think. Is there was one player in that field, there was one creator in that field that was decked out in LIV logos on their apparel.
Yes, there was. And interestingly, only one.
Only one. So what does that mean? Is he going to LIV?
Yeah. What it means is a perfect place for a break. Let's do a quick word from our sponsors. We'll tell you who that was, but I also want to talk about some of the things that really do matter, again, for moving the needle going forward. All right, guys, this is exciting because we're working with the PGA of America to get you early registration for the 2026 PGA Championship tickets at Aronimink. And what registration does is it puts you ahead of the general public with a preferred place in line to purchase tickets once they become available in May. And all you have to do is go to golficity.com/PGA to get registered. Registration is absolutely free and does not obligate you to purchase tickets. But like I said, what it does do is it secures your preferred place in line. So getting registered is an absolute no-brainer. On top of that, Mike and I will be there at Aronimink in Philly for the 2026 PGA Championship. So we're definitely hoping to see a few of you there. And remember, this is a major championship, so tickets are going to sell out fast, and early registration is your way in the door. So make sure you use our link to get registered, and we will see you there.
All right, guys, huge thanks to FootJoy. They have been making us look good for such a long time, and it's easy because they've got the best apparel in the business. And this year, we are so hype on the new Hyperflex shoes. Every year, they've got something creative that comes out, and they've knocked it out of the park with Hyperflex. We've played in them. We have both colorways. They look good. They feel good. They're comfortable. And that's the one thing over the past few years, Frank, especially with the Scotland, we played 10 rounds, 6 days, like feet. It's so important. You have to be comfortable. And they knocked it out. They got this true fit system, allows you to lock in your feet when you can grip it and rip it in confidence. You don't got to worry about slipping out there. The traction control, it's all there. FootJoy, they are some of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to golf apparel. So check out the new Hyperflex, the blue, the red, whatever color you're into. Guys like Justin Thomas are even playing it on tour. They love it so much, so you got to check it out for yourself. The all-new Hyperflex. Go to footjoy.com.
And speaking of looking good, that throwback heritage.
Retro, man.
Retro
one of my
limited
favorites.
edition. I mean, it's going to be
7
said.
years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Looks too good.
Right.
All right, we ended with a little cliffhanger there before we got into the break. And you could bring up a good point. And this really comes down to like whether these guys can then kind of play both sides of the field so long as that we still have this divide between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. And that golfer in general was Grant himself, who was on his channel. Very interestingly, I know he had his normal Primo hat on, but he had a shirt with high flyers. It was Phil's team. You had him with LIV Golf. I think it was on the collar. It was very forward facing, and it does make you wonder, like a guy like Phil, as he gets a very closer relationship with Grant, could we see coming where Grant has part ownership in that team? No different than we saw like with TGL, where Good now has a part ownership in the LA Golf Club. Are we starting to see those crossovers there? And does that then muddy the water? Because you look at a guy like Grant, he's, arguably like the most desired creator for both of these leagues right now. And he's also kind of the face of the Creator Classic because he's the winner. Right. He's holding the trophy, at the PGA Tour, and he's wearing high flyers the next day. So whereas a lot of the other creators that were there were wearing just their traditional branded or unbranded stuff. The only other one I would say that we knew about was Rick Shiels.
Of course.
Because Rick is not hiding it in any way.
Yeah.
He made it known that he signed with LIV Golf, but we haven't heard of any official signing with Grant for LIV, but he was, a lot of people saw it and pointed out he was wearing all the logoing. So that's interesting.
There's two ways I can go with that. I think first is that fact that Grant and Phil are both YouTube kind of partners now. They're business partners in Primo, the apparel company. They both own a stake in it. The high flyers wear Primo. So, if I own a piece of that company during a video like this, I would probably be wearing it too. But the LIV logos, right? That's what catches me. We went maybe 10 episodes ago. We were talking about, I was speculating, like, will LIV sign Grant? And we were debating it. And you had a good point. You said he doesn't have the tour caliber game to compete with these guys.
Right. But signing means a lot of things. Could he be signed like the way Rick was? Yes.
Right.
What I was saying is I can't imagine, him being one of the four men on the team. I
don't
can't
know.
see that yet.
I mean, his game isn't bad. With
His game is fantastic.
The duels have showed me that he could hang. Now, is he as good as the pros? No.
Right.
But he's got the game. Maybe he can tune it up. Maybe in a year's time he could be tour ready. You know,
I would make a great content series to see Ken Grant get tour ready.
You're talking about, a dream for him. Content galore, huge money signing to LIV, playing with Phil, his buddy, his business partner. It could be the path. We were fortunate to get Grant here on the show right when he left Good.
Yeah.
And I look back and see how smart that move was for this guy, right? But
his career's taken off.
Which has me think about this, not to just crazily switch gears, but why wasn't Garrett or any Good a part of that? And why wasn't Foreplay, another creator classic participant, not involved? Tells me those two guys are very tied to the PGA Tour.
No doubt. And as much as we reported on and we talked about the PGA Tour first kind of threatening these guys a little bit, but then walking that back, there's still no denying that if you go and do these things with LIV, that you're putting that in jeopardy, that even if it's not, an outright ban from the PGA Tour, you could be a very silent blacklist, and some of these guys
100%.
And I look specifically to your example of Barstool. They have made a very big lucrative business for themselves of doing co-branded merchandise with the PGA Tour,
Yes.
which is, that I could see as a business move. And out of all of them, the biggest business when it comes to creators is definitely Barstool.
Yep.
Right? They are thinking, I think, a lot more broadly when it comes to apparel and business, and I don't think that's something that they want to lose out on. But going back to like Grant joining the team, I think the one optics that would not be good, now, who knows down the line where his game goes, I think one thing that LIV has tried very hard to shake off is the idea of it being an exhibition.
Right, yeah.
Right? And I think if you take a guy who has not done the normal of working his way through mini tours and working his way into a tour,
Sure.
I think it's a little bit harder to see as not exhibition if you just threw him on the team, a content creator. For as great as he is as a golfer, you still have to, in a certain way, like kind of go through that trial by fire that the other guys do.
I do think they should test it on a day where maybe there's an injury and Grant subs in for the high flyers, and they just test it, see what the ratings look like. Did they strike gold? Did he play well?
What was the feedback?
What was the feedback? You're
You never know.
until you
Look,
try it.
look at the TGL. They just these 1 day contracts.
One day
where they would
contract
just
with
sign
fee
guys
now?
on, because the other guys couldn't make it. But let's quickly talk though here about one of the most important things. And like I said, whether or not it moves the needle, as far as having these events, we talk about, does it translate to viewership? One thing that I could say that I think it definitely does do is it helps dramatically with turning around and developing the personalities of these players. When I talk about that, I mean the LIV golfers who participated in the duels. And whether you're a LIV fan, whether you're a LIV hater, whatever you are, one thing that I think we can all agree on is that when a lot of these guys went over to LIV, they were largely seen as the villains. Now, there's some people that they're, early LIV adopters who loved this move, but I think from a broad sense in the public consciousness, guys like Phil Mickelson, guys like Dustin Johnson, guys even like Cam Smith right after his Open win going over to LIV were in a lot of ways immediately saw as villains and kind of labeled as such. I think the only thing that turns that around long term is them being able to showcase their personalities in these more lighthearted ways that in a lot of ways, I hate to use the word, but humanize them.
Yeah,
right? And I think the perfect example of that, no one shows that better than what Bryson DeChambeau did. Bryson could be said to have been at one time the biggest villain in all of golf. There was like a lot of people and we saw whole, full swing Netflix episodes on how hated he was.
Right.
And I don't think in all of professional sports that I can think of, current professional sports, anyone has turned their image around in a more 180-degree way than him.
Absolutely.
And it largely came down to him launching his YouTube channel, showcasing his personality, and he became one of the most loved personalities in golf, one of the most endeared personalities in golf. So one thing that I picked up from watching the duels was getting to see guys like Dustin Johnson joking around again, showing their personality, because the reality is you don't see that in a LIV broadcast because they're not mic'd up. They're out there playing, and competing. And they're overall, at least here in the States, you can argue with me if you're international and you see more of it, but their visibility has gone largely down, right? So we don't get to see that. Or on the other hand, you might see it in like a Netflix documentary where like maybe their villainhood is played up a little bit. It's all through other lenses where they're not speaking directly unfiltered to camera like you get in a YouTube video.
Yeah.
So watching this and getting to re-witness, personally, I always enjoyed was Cam Smith. You know what I mean? And getting to see a little bit of that, I think bodes well for the long-term turnaround and the adoption and the bringing in of new audiences into LIV. I mean, that's my initial thought on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, again, I just, I say these guys have come out of the spotlight. Yeah, the week in, week out PGA Tour spotlight where you could turn on a TV every week and watch them. And now they were in it. They were enjoying it on YouTube. They were able to be a little free. Seeing Dustin Johnson like just talk, it's just fun, because you never hear the guy say anything. So I totally agree.
I'll tell you what, this is where then if the powers that be are listening, this is where I would then, the next logical step for me to take this. I think, and it goes back to like we said before, the guys on LIV are definitely, there's the league itself has a little bit more control and say and do over what these guys do because they have contracts. Unlike the guys on the PGA Tour they don't have contracts with the tour, they're independent contractors. On LIV they do, and LIV has a little bit more say in what they do. I think if we look at the case study of the dramatic success of Bryson DeChambeau and how having, clearly there's a YouTube audience who's craving personalities and all that type of stuff. And you've already got some crossovers. Like think about how any YouTube channel nowadays seems to be launched. You take a new guy, you put him with a group of established guys, they get to know his personality and then he spins off his own channel. If it were me, any of the guys who are even hinting at willing to do so, I would make every single one of them have their own YouTube channel.
Right.
And I understand these guys are vastly rich from their contracts. They're busy guys. They're professional golfers. They may not want to be YouTubers, but that's not me saying that they need to be like Bryson holding the camera and super involved in that way.
Right.
You got all the money in the world, hire camera crews to just go and follow these guys and give me, 20, 30 episodes a year on their YouTube channel. Go out on the boat fishing with Dustin Johnson.
Yeah.
Travel around with Cam Smith, as he goes
fishing and
whatever, and going back to Australia and developing that audience and give them a chance, no different than Bryson did, to showcase their personalities and make them, in a lot of ways, YouTube personalities that we start to blur this line between who is a YouTuber and who isn't. And I think that is what starts to get people long-term to start watching the tournaments because now they want to see their favorite, YouTuber, so to speak, compete in a tournament. Now, again, not everybody's going to do it. Not everybody's going to do it nearly as well as Bryson did, but it's low-hanging fruit to me. It's in it. It's not super expensive. All that type of stuff. Just get somebody, following them around with cameras, helping them develop a YouTube presence. And I think ultimately, the crossovers that we're already seeing where Phil is constantly playing on, Grant's channel, Phil developing his own channel even more is a way that he can develop a new and younger audience. I think it's a no-brainer. And I think it's something for them to chase.
I agree.
Yeah. So the question really becomes like, will this be the thing that ultimately kind of saves it in a lot of ways? And in a lot of ways, I understand that there's still a lot of viewership doesn't necessarily need saving, but for the future and looking forward, our content creators the key. It's definitely an interesting thing to think about, and we'll continue watching it. Make sure you guys subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one.